Setting the scene, although widely published and read by itself, the Bhagavad Gita originally appears as an episode in the Mahabharata, the epic Sanskrit history of the ancient world. The Mahabharata tells of events leading to the present age of Kali. It was at the beginning of this age, some 50 centuries ago, that Lord Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita to his friend and devotee Arjuna. Their discourse, one of the greatest philosophical and religious dialogues known to man, took place just before the onset of war. A great fratricidal conflict between hundred sons of Dhritarashtra, and on the opposite their cousins, the Pandavas or sons of Pandu. Dhritarashtra and Pandu were brothers born in the Kuru dynasty, descending from King Bharat, a former ruler of the earth, from whom the name Mahabharat derives. Because Dhritarashtra, the elder brother, was born blind, the throne that otherwise would have been his was passed down to the younger brother Pandu. When Pandu died at an early age, his five children Yudhishthir, Bhim, Arjun, Nakul, and Sahadev came under the care of Dhritarashtra, who in fact became for the time being the king. Thus, the sons of Dhritarashtra and those of Pandu grew up in the same royal household. Both were trained in the military arts by the expert Drona and counseled by the revered grandfather of the clan Bhishma. Yet the sons of Dhritarashtra, especially the eldest Duryodhana, hated and envied the Pandavas, and the blind and weak-minded Dhritarashtra wanted his sons, not those of Pandu, to inherit the kingdom. Thus Duryodhana, with Dhritarashtra's consent, plotted to kill the young sons of Pandu. And it was only by the careful protection of their uncle Vidur and their cousin Lord Krishna that the Pandavas escaped the many attempts against their lives. Now, Lord Krishna was not an ordinary man, but the supreme personality of Godhead himself, who had descended to the earth and was playing the role of a prince in a contemporary dynasty. In this role, he was also the nephew of Pandu's wife Kunti, or Pritha, the mother of the Pandavas. So, both as a relative and and as the eternal upholder of religion, Krishna favored the righteous sons of Pandu and protected them. Ultimately, however, the clever Duryodhana challenged the Pandavas to a gambling match. In the course of that fateful tournament, Duryodhana and his brothers took possession of Draupadi, the chaste and devoted wife of the Pandavas, and incidentally tried to strip her naked before the entire assembly of princes and kings. Krishna's divine intervention saved her, but the gambling, which was rigged, cheated the Pandavas for their kingdom and forced them into 13 years of exile.
Upon returning from exile, the Pandavas rightfully requested their kingdom from Duryodhana, who bluntly refused to yield it. Duty bound as princesses to serve in the public administration, the five Pandavas reduced their request to a mere 5 villages. But Duryodhana arrogantly replied that he wouldn't spare them enough land uh, into which to derive a pain. Throughout all this, the Pandavas had been consistently tolerant and forbearing. But now the war seemed unavoidable. Nonetheless, as the princes of the world divided, some siding with the sons of Dhritarashtra, other with the Pandavas, and Krishna himself took the role of messenger for the four sons of Pandu. Sorry, five. Yeah, role of the messenger for the sons of Pandu, and went to the court of Dhritarashtra to plead for peace. When his pleas were refused, war was now certain. The Pandavas, men of the highest moral stature, recognized Krishna to be the supreme personality of Godhead, whereas the impious sons of Dhritarashtra did not. Yet Krishna offered to enter the war according to the desire of the uh, antagonist as God. He would not personally fight, but whoever so desired might avail himself of Krishna's army, and the other side could have Krishna himself as an advisor and helper. Duryodhana, the political genius, snatched at Krishna's armed forces, while the Pandavas were equally eager to have Krishna himself. In this way, Krishna became the charioteer of Arjuna, taking it upon himself to drive the uh, fabled bowman's chariot. This brings to us the point at which Bhagavad Gita begins. With the two armies arrayed, ready for the combat, Dhritarashtra anxiously inquiring for his secretary Sanjay, what did they do? The scene is set with only the need of a brief. The scene is set with only the need of a brief note regarding this translation and commentary. The general pattern translators have followed in rendering Bhagavad Gita into English and has been to brush aside the person Krishna to make room for their own concept and philosophies. This history of Mahabharata is taken as um, quaint mythology, and Krishna becomes a poetic device for presenting the ideas of some anonymous genius, or at the best, he becomes a minor historical personage. But the person Krishna is both the goal and the substance of the Bhagavad Gita. So as far as the Gita speaks of itself, the translation and the commentary that accompanies it propose to direct um, it proposed to direct the reader of Krishna rather than away from him. The Bhagavad Gita thus becomes wholly consistent and comprehensible. Since Krishna is the speaker of the Gita, and its ultimate goal is as well the Bhagavad Gita is, as it is present this great scripture in two terms. The publishers.
Dedication to Srila Baldev Vidyabhushan, who presented so nicely Govinda Bhashya commentary on Vedanta philosophy. Preface. Originally, I wrote Bhagavad Gita in the form in which it is presented now. When this book was first published, the original manuscript was unfortunately cut short to less than 400 pages, without illustrations and without explanations for most of the original verses of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. In all of my books, Srimad Bhagavatam, Sri Ishopanishad, etc., the system is that I gave the original verse, its English translation, transliteration, word for word Sanskrit English equivalents, translations, and purports. This makes the book very authentic and scholarly and makes the meaning self evident. I was not very happy, therefore, when I had to minimize my original manuscript. Um, but later on, when the demand for Bhagavad Gita as it is considerably increased, I was requested by many scholars and devotees to present the book in its original form. Thus, the present attempt is to offer the original manuscript of this great book of knowledge with full parampara explanation in order to establish the Krishna consciousness movement more soundly and progressively. Our Krishna consciousness movement is genuine, historically authorized, natural, and transcendental due to its being based on Bhagavad Gita as it is. It is gradually becoming the most popular movement in the entire world, especially amongst the younger generation. It is becoming more and more interesting to the older generation also. Although older gentlemen are becoming interested so much so that the fathers and grandfathers of my disciples are encouraging us by becoming life members of our great society, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. In Los Angeles, many fathers and mothers used to come to see me to express their feelings of gratitude for my leading the Krishna Consciousness movement throughout the entire world. Some of them said that it is greatly fortunate for the Americans that I have started the Krishna Consciousness movement in America. But actually, the original father of this movement is Lord Krishna himself. Since it was started a very long time ago, it is coming down to human society by disciplic succession. If I have any credit in this connection, it does not belong to me personally, but it is due to my eternal spiritual master, His Divine Grace Om Vishnupad Paramhams Parivrajakacharya 108 श्री श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी Maharaj Prabhupada. If I personally I have any if personally I have any credit in this matter, it is only that I have tried to present Bhagavad Gita as it is, without any adulteration. Before my presentation of Bhagavad Gita as it is, almost all the English editions of Bhagavad Gita were introduced to fulfill someone's personal ambition. But our attempt in presenting Bhagavad Gita as it is to present the mission of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. Our business is to present the will of Krishna, not that of any mundane speculator like the politician, philosopher, or scientist, for they have very little knowledge of Krishna, despite all their knowledge, all their other knowledge. When Krishna says, Mama, man manabhav mad bhakto madhya jivam namaskuru, etc., we, unlike the so called scholars, do not say that Krishna and his inner spirit are different. Krishna is absolute, and there is no difference between Krishna's name, Krishna's form, Krishna's qualities, Krishna's pastimes, etc. This absolute position of Krishna is difficult to understand for any person who is not a devotee of Krishna in the system of parampara, disciplic succession. Generally, the so-called scholars, politicians, philosophers, and swamis without perfect knowledge of Krishna try to banish or kill Krishna when writing commentary on Bhagavad Gita. Such unauthorized commentary upon Bhagavad Gita is known as Mayavad Bhashya, and Lord Chaitanya has warned us about the unauthorized man. Lord Chaitanya clearly says that anyone who tries to understand Bhagavad Gita from the Mayavadi point of view will commit a great blunder. The result of such a blunder will be that the misguided student of Bhagavad Gita will certainly be bewildered on the path of spiritual guidance and will not be able to go back home back to Godhead. Our only purpose is to present this Bhagavad Gita as it is, in order to guide the conditioned student to the same purpose for which Krishna descends to this planet once in a day of Brahma, or every 8,600,000,000 years. This purpose is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, and we have to accept it as it is. Otherwise, there is no point in trying to understand the Bhagavad Gita and its speaker, Lord Krishna. But Krishna first spoke Bhagavad Gita to the sun god some hundreds of millions of years ago. We have to accept this fact and thus understand the historical significance of Bhagavad Gita without misinterpretation on the authority of Krishna. To interpret Bhagavad Gita without any reference to the will of Krishna is the greatest offense. In order to save oneself from this offense, one has to understand the Lord as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as he was directly understood by Krishna. Lord Krishna's first disciple. Such understanding of Bhagavad Gita is really profitable and authorized for the welfare of human society in fulfilling the mission of life.
The Krishna consciousness movement is essential in human society, for it offers the highest perfection of life. How this is so how this is so is explained fully in the Bhagavad Gita. Unfortunately, mundane wranglers have taken advantage of Bhagavad Gita to push forward their demoniac propensities and mislead people regarding right understanding of the simple principles of life. Everyone should know how God or Krishna is great, and everyone should know the factual position of the living entity. Everyone should know that a living entity is eternal, is eternally a servant, and that unless one serves Krishna, one has to serve illusion in different varieties of the three modes of material nature, and thus wander perpetually within the cycle of birth and death. Even the so-called liberated Mayavadi speculator has to undergo this. Every living being has to undergo this process. This knowledge is this knowledge constitutes a great scientist, a great science, and each and every living being has to hear it for his own interest. People generally, People in general, especially in the age of Kali, are enamored by the external energy of Krishna, and they wrongly think that by the advancement of material comforts, every man will be happy. They have no knowledge that the material or external nature is very strong, for everyone is strongly bound by the stringent laws of material nature. A living entity is happily the part and parcel of the Lord, and and thus his natural function is to give service to the Lord. By the spell of illusion, one tries to be happy by serving his personal sense gratification in in different forms, which will never make him happy. Instead of satisfying his own personal material senses, he has to satisfy the senses of others. This is the way of life of a living entity. Everyone should know that the living entity is eternal, and that Sorry. Instead of satisfying his own personal material senses, he has to satisfy the senses of the Lord. That is the highest perfection of life. The Lord wants this and He demands it. One has to understand the central point of the Bhagavad Gita. Our Krishna consciousness movement is teaching the whole world this central point, and because we are not polluting the theme of the Bhagavad Gita as it is, anyone seriously interested in deriving benefit by studying the Bhagavad Gita must take help from Krishna consciousness movement or for practical understanding of the Bhagavad Gita under the direction of the under the direct guidance of the Lord. We hope, therefore, that people will derive the greatest benefit by studying Bhagavad Gita as it is, as we have presented it here. And even if one man becomes pure devotee of the Lord, he shall consider our attempts a success. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, 12 May 1971, Sydney, Australia.
I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with a torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Then will Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who has established within this material world the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, gives me shelter under his lotus feet. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master and unto the feet of all Vaishnavas. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of Sri Rupa Goswami, along with his elder brother Sanatan Goswami, as well as Raghunath Das Goswami and Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Gopal Bhatt and Srila Jiva Goswami. I offer my respectful obeisances to Lord Krishna Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, along with Advaita Acharya, Gadadhar, Shrivas, and other associates. I offer my respectful obeisances to Srimati Radharani and Sri Krishna, along with their associates Sri Lalita and Sri Vishakha. Oh my dear Krishna, you are the friend of the distressed and the source of creation. You are the master of the gopis and the lover of Radharani. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I offer my respects to Srimati Radharani, whose bodily complexion is just like molten gold and who is the queen of Vrindavan. You are daughter of King Vishnu, and you are very dear to Lord Krishna.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They can fulfill the desires of everyone just like desired trees, and they are full of compassion for the fallen souls. I offer my respectful obeisances to Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita, Gadadhara, Srivas, and all others in the line of devotion. Bhagavad Gita is also known as Gita Upanishad. It is the essence of Vedic knowledge and one essence of Vedic knowledge and one of the most important Upanishads in Vedic literature. Of course, there are many commentaries in English on the Bhagavad Gita, and one may question the necessity of another one. This present edition can be explained in the following way. Recently, an American lady asked me to recommend an English translation of the Bhagavad Gita. Of course, in America, there are so many editions of Bhagavad Gita available in English. But as far as I have seen, not only in America but also in India, none of them can be strictly said to be authoritative because in almost every one of them, the commentator has expressed his own opinions without touching the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita as it is. The spirit of Bhagavad Gita is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita itself. It is just like this. If we want to take a particular medicine, then we have to follow the directions written on the label. We cannot take the medicine according to our own whim or direction of a friend. It must be taken according to the directions on the label or directions given by a physician. Similarly, Bhagavad Gita should be taken or accepted as it is directed by the speaker himself. The speaker of the Bhagavad Gita is Lord Sri Krishna himself. He is mentioned on every page of the Bhagavad Gita as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan. Of course, the word Bhagavan sometimes refers to any powerful person or any powerful demigod, and certainly here Bhagavan designates Lord Sri Krishna as the great personality. But at the same time, we should know that Lord Sri Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, as is confirmed by all great acharyas, spiritual masters like Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Nimbarka Swami, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and many other authorities of Vedic knowledge in India. The Lord Himself has also the Lord Himself also establishes Himself as the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the Bhagavad Gita, and He is accepted as such in the Brahma Samhita in all the Puranas, especially the Srimad Bhagavatam, known as the Bhagavad Puran. Krishnastu Bhagwan Swayam. Therefore, we should take the Bhagavad Gita as it is directed by the personality of Godhead Himself. In the fourth chapter of the Gita, Lord says, here the Lord informs Arjuna, that this system of yoga, the Bhagavad Gita, was spoken to the sun god, and the sun god explained it to Manu, and Manu explained it to Ikshvaku. And in this way, by disciplic succession, one speaker after another, this yoga system has been coming down. But in the course of time, it has become lost. Consequently, the Lord has to speak it again, this time to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra.
He tells Arjuna that he is relating the supreme secret to him because Arjuna is his devotee and his friend. The purpose of this is that Bhagavad Gita is a treatise which is especially meant for the devotee of the Lord. There are three classes of transcendentalists, namely the Jnani, the Yogi, and the Bhakta, or the impersonalist, the meditator, and the devotee. Here the Lord clearly tells Arjuna that he is making him the first receiver of a new parampara, disciplic succession, because the old succession was broken. It was the Lord's wish, therefore, to establish another parampara in the same line of thought that was coming down from the sun god to others. And it was his wish that his teaching to be distributed anew by Arjuna. He wanted Arjuna to become the authority in understanding the Bhagavad Gita. So we see that Bhagavad Gita is instructed to Arjuna, especially because Arjuna was a devotee of the Lord, a direct student of Krishna and his intimate friend. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita is understood by a person who has qualities similar to Arjuna's. That is to say, he must be a devotee in direct relationship with the Lord. As soon as one becomes the devotee of the Lord, he also has a direct relationship with the Lord. That is very elaborate subject matter, but briefly it can be stated that a devotee is in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in one of five different ways. One may be a devotee in a passive state, one may be a devotee in an active state, one may be a devotee as a friend, one may be a devotee as a parent, one may be a devotee as a conjugal lover. Arjuna was in relationship with the Lord as friend. Of course, there is a gulf of difference between the friendship of this world and the transcendental friendship. This is transcendental friendship which can be had by everyone, which cannot be held by everyone. Of course, everyone has a particular relationship with the Lord, and that relationship is evoked by the perfection of devotional service. But in the present status of our life, not only we have forgotten the Supreme Lord, but we have forgotten our eternal relationship with the Lord. Every living being out of many, many billions and trillions of living beings mm, has a particular relationship with the Lord eternally. That is called Swarupa. By the process of devotional service, one can revive that Swarupa, and that stage is called Swarupa Siddhi, perfection of one's constitutional position. So Arjuna was a devotee and he was in touch with the Supreme Lord in friendship. How Arjuna accepted this Bhagavad Gita should be noted. His manner of acceptance is given in the 10th chapter. Arjuna Vacha Param Brahma Param Dhama Pavitram Paramam Bhavan Purusham Shashvatam Divyam Adidevam Ajam Vibhum Ahustvam Rishaya Sarve Devarshara Naradastata Asito Devalo Vyasah Swam Chaiva Pravishinu Sarvam Edadritam Manye Yanmam Vadasi Keshava Nahi Nahi Te Bhagavan Vyaktam Vidurdeva Danavaha. Arjuna said, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ultimate abode, the purest, the absolute truth. You are the eternal, transcendental, original person, the unborn, the greatest. All the great sages such as Narad, Asit, Deval, and Vyas confirm this truth about you, and now you yourself are declaring it to me. Oh Krishna, I totally accept as truth all that you have told to me. Neither the demigods nor the demons, oh Lord, can understand your personality.
After hearing Bhagavad Gita from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Arjuna accepted Krishna as Param Brahma, the Supreme Brahma. Every living being is Brahma, but the Supreme Living Being or the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Supreme Brahma. Param Dhama means that he is the supreme rest or abode of everything. Pavitra means that he is pure, untainted by material contamination. Purusham means that he is the supreme enjoyer. Shashvatam, eternal. Divyam, transcendental, and Adi Devam, the original supreme personality of Godhead. Ajam, the unborn, and Vibhum, the greatest. Now one may think that because Krishna was the friend of Arjuna, Arjuna was telling him all this by way of flattery, but Arjuna, just to drive out this kind of doubt from the minds of the readers of the Bhagavad Gita, um, substain, substain, substantiates these praises in the next verse when he says that Krishna is accepted as a supreme personality of Godhead not only by himself but the authorities like Narada, Asita, Deval, and Vyasdev. These are great personalities who distribute the Vedic knowledge as it is accepted by as it is accepted by all acharyas. Therefore, Arjuna tells Krishna that he accepts whatever he says to be completely perfect. Sarvam etad Ritam Manni. I accept everything you say to me, say to be true. Arjuna also says that the personality of Godhead, the personality of the Lord is very difficult to understand, and that he cannot be even known by the great demigods. This means that the Lord cannot even be known by greater. This means that the Lord cannot even be known by personalities greater than human beings. So, how can a human being understand Lord Shri Krishna without becoming his devotee? Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita should be taken up in a spirit of devotion. One should not think that he is equal to Lord Krishna, nor should he think that Krishna is an ordinary personality or even a great personality. Lord Shri Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. So, according to the statements of the Bhagavad Gita or the statements of Arjuna, the person who is trying to understand the Bhagavad Gita, we should at least try, at least the theoretically accept Shri Krishna as the supreme personality of Godhead, and with that submissive spirit, we can understand the Bhagavad Gita unless one reads the Bhagavad Gita. Unless one reads the Bhagavad Gita in a submissive spirit, it is very difficult to understand Bhagavad Gita because it is a great mystery. Just what is the Bhagavad Gita? The purpose of Bhagavad Gita is to deliver mankind from the nescience of material existence. Every man is in difficulty in so many ways. As Arjuna was also in difficulty in having to fight the battle of Kurukshetra. Arjuna surrendered unto Sri Krishna, and consequently, this Bhagavad Gita was spoken. Not only Arjuna, but every one of us is full of anxieties because of this material existence. Our very existence is in the atmosphere of non-existence. Actually, we are not meant to be threatened by non-existence. Our existence is eternal, but somehow or other we are put into asat. Asat refers to which does not exist.
Out of so many human beings who are suffering, there are few who are actually inquiring about their position as to what they are put, why they are put into this awkward position, and so on. Unless one is awakened to this position of questioning his suffering, unless he realizes that he doesn't want to suffer but rather wants to make a solution to all suffering, then one is not to be considered a perfect human being. Humanity begins when this sort of inquiry is awakened in one's mind. In the Brahma Sutra, this inquiry is called Brahma Jignasa. Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Every activity of the human being is to be considered a failure unless he inquires about the nature of the absolute. Therefore, those who will begin to question why they are suffering and or where they come from, where they shall go after death, are proper students for understanding Bhagavad Gita. The sincere student should also have a firm respect for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such a student was Arjuna. Lord Krishna designed this specifically to re-establish the real purpose of life when man forgets that purpose. Even then, out of many human beings who awaken, there may be one who actually enters the spirit of understanding his position, and for him, this Bhagavad Gita is spoken. Actually, we are all swallowed by the tigress of nescience, but the Lord is very merciful upon the living entities, especially to human beings. To this end, he spoke the Bhagavad Gita, making his friend Arjuna his student. Being an associate of Lord Krishna, Arjuna was above all ignorance. But Arjuna was put into ignorance on the battlefield of Kurukshetra just to question Lord Krishna about the problems of life, so that the Lord could explain them for the benefit of future generations of human beings and chalk out the plan of life. Then man could act accordingly and perfect the mission of human life. The subject of the Bhagavad Gita entails the comprehension of five basic truths. First of all, the science of God is explained, then the constitutional position of the living entities, jivas. There is Ishwar, which means the controller, and there are jivas, the living entities which are controlled. If a living entity says that he is not controlled but he is free, then he is insane. The living being is controlled in every respect, at least in his conditioned life. So in the Bhagavad Gita, the subject matter deals with the Ishvara, the supreme controller, and the Jivas, the controlled living entities. Prakriti, material nature, and the time, the duration of existence of the whole universe, or the manifestation of material nature, and karma, activity, are also discussed. The cosmic manifestation is full of different activities. All living entities are engaged in different activities. From Bhagavad Gita, we must learn what God is, what the living entities are, what Prakriti is, what the cosmic manifestation is, how is it controlled by time, and what the activities of the living entities are.
Out of these five basic subject matters in the Bhagavad Gita, it is established that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or Krishna, or Brahma, or the Supreme Controller or Paramatma, you may use whatever name you like, is the greatest of all. The living beings are in the living beings are in quality like the Supreme Controller. For instance, the Lord has control over um,
The Lord has control over the universal affairs of material nature as will be explained in the later chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. Material nature is not independent. She is acting under the direction of the Supreme Lord. As Lord Krishna says, Maya Dakshina Prakriti Suyate Swataracharam. This material nature is working under my direction. When we see wonderful things happening in the cosmic nature, we should know that behind this cosmic manifestation there is a controller. Nothing could be manifested without being controlled. It is childish not to consider the controller. For instance, a child may think that an automobile is quite wonderful um, to be able to run without a horse or other animal pulling it. But a sane man knows the nature of the automobiles engineering arrangement. He always know that behind the machinery there is a man, a driver. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is the driver those direction everything is working. Under whose direction everything is working. Now the jivas or the living entities have accepted by the Lord, as we note in the later chapters, as is part and parcels. A particle of gold is also gold. A drop of water from the ocean is also salty, and similarly, we the living entities, being part and parcel of the supreme controller, Ishvara or Bhagwan, Lord Shri Krishna, have all the qualities of the supreme lord in minute quantity, because we are minute Ishwaras, subordinate Ishwaras. We are trying to control nature, as presently we are trying to control space or planets, and this tendency to control is there because it is in Krishna. But although we have a tendency to lord over material nature, we should know that we are not the supreme controller. This is explained in the Bhagavad Gita. What is material nature? This is also explained in the Gita as inferior prakriti, inferior in nature. The living entity is explained as the superior Prakriti. Prakriti is always under control, whether inferior or superior. Prakriti is female and she is controlled by the Lord, just as the activities of a wife are controlled by the husband. Prakriti is always subordinate, predominated by the Lord, who is the predominator. The living entities and the material nature are both predominated, controlled by the Supreme Lord. According to the Gita, the living entities, although part and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are to be considered Prakriti. This is clearly mentioned in the seventh chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Aparayam itas tve anyam prakritim vidhi me param jiva bhutam. This material nature is my inferior Prakriti, but beyond this is another Prakriti, jiva bhutam, the living entities. Material nature itself is constituted by three qualities: the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of ignorance. Above these modes, there is eternal time, and by a combination of these modes of nature and under the control of the purview of eternal time, there are activities which are called karma. These activities are being carried out from time immemorial, and we are suffering or enjoying the fruits of our activities. For instance, suppose I am a businessman and have worked very hard with intelligence and have amassed a great bank balance. Then I am an enjoyer, but then say I have lost all my money in business, then I am a sufferer. Similarly, in every field of life, we enjoy the results of our work, or we suffer the results. This is called karma.
Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, Jiva, the living entity, Prakriti, nature, Kal, eternal time, and karma, activity, are all explained in the Bhagavad Gita. Out of these five, the Lord, the living entities, material nature, and time are eternal. The manifestation of Prakriti may be temporary, but it is not false. Some philosophers say that the manifestation of material nature is false, but according to the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita or according to the philosophy of the Vaishnavas, this is not so. Manifestation of the world is not accepted as false, it is accepted as real but temporary. It is likened unto a cloud which moves across the sky or coming of the rainy season which nourishes grains. As soon as the rainy season is over and as soon as the cloud goes away, all the crops which were nourished by the rain dry up. Similarly, this material manifestation takes place at a certain interval, stays for a while, and then disappears. Such are the workings of the Prakriti. But this cycle is working eternally. Therefore, Prakriti is eternal. It is not false. The Lord refers to this as my Prakriti. This material nature is the separated energy of the Supreme Lord. And similarly, the living entities are also the energy of the Supreme Lord, although they are not separated but eternally related. So, the Lord, the living entity, the material nature, and time are all interrelated and all are eternal. However, the other item, karma, is not eternal. The effects of karma may be very old indeed. We are suffering or enjoying the results of our activities from time immemorial. But we can change the results of our karma or our activity, and this change depends on the perfection of our knowledge. We are engaged in various activities, and undoubtedly we do not know what sort of activities we should adopt to gain relief from the actions and reactions of all these activities. But this is also explained in the Bhagavad Gita. The position of Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, is that of supreme consciousness. The jivas or the living entities, being parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are also conscious. Both the living entities and the material nature are explained as Prakriti, the energy of the Supreme Lord. But one of the two, the jiva, is conscious. Prakriti is not conscious. That is the difference. Therefore, the jiva Prakriti are also is called superior because the jiva has consciousness which is similar to the Lord's. The Lord is supreme consciousness, however, and one should not claim that the jiva, the living entity, is also supremely conscious. The living being cannot be supremely conscious at any stage of his perfection, and the theory that he can be so is a misleading theory. Conscious he may be, but he is not perfectly or supremely conscious. The distinction between the Jiva and the Ishvara will be explained in the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. The Lord is Kshetrajna, conscious as the living being, but the living being is not conscious of his particular body, whereas the Lord is conscious of all bodies because he lives in the heart of every living being. He is conscious of the psychic movements of the particular jivas. We should not forget this. It is also explained that the Paramatma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is living in everyone's heart as Ishvara, as the controller, and that he is giving directions for the living entity to act as he desires. The living entity forgets what to do. First of all, he makes a determination to act in a certain way, and then he is entangled in the actions and reactions of his own karma. After giving up one type of body, he enters another type of body as we take off and put on new clothes. As the soul thus transmigrates, he suffers the actions and reactions of his past activities. These activities can be changed when the living entity is in the mode of goodness, insanity, and understands what sort of activities he should adopt. If he does so, then all the actions and reactions of his past activities can be changed. Consequently, karma is not eternal. Therefore, we stated that of the five items, Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, time, and karma, four are eternal, whereas karma is not eternal.
Supreme conscious Ishvara is similar to the living entity in this way. Both the consciousness of the Lord and that of the living entity are transcendental. It is not that consciousness is generated by the association of matter. This is a mistaken idea. The theory that uh, the theory that consciousness develops under certain circumstances of material combination is not accepted in the Bhagavad Gita. Consciousness may be pervadedly reflected by the covering of material circumstances, just as light reflected through colored glass may appear to be of a certain color, but the consciousness of the Lord is not materially affected. Lord Krishna says, "Madhyakshena Prakriti." When he descends into the material universe, his consciousness is not materially affected. If he were so affected, he would be unfit to speak on the transcendental matters as he does in the Bhagavad Gita. One cannot say anything about the transcendental world without being free from the material contaminated consciousness. So the Lord is not materially contaminated. Our consciousness at the present moment, however, is materially contaminated. The Bhagavad Gita teaches that we have to purify this materially contaminated consciousness. In pure consciousness, our actions will be deviated to the will of the Ishvara, and that will make us happy. It is not that we have to cease all activities; rather, our activities are to be purified, and purified activities are called bhakti. Activities in bhakti appear to be like ordinary activities, but they are not contaminated. An ignorant person may see that a devotee is acting or working like an ordinary man, but such a person with a poor fund of knowledge does not know that the activities of the devotee or the devotee of the Lord are not contaminated by impure consciousness or matter. They are transcendental to the three modes of nature. We should know, however, that at this point our consciousness is contaminated. When we are materially contaminated, we are called conditioned false consciousness is exhibited under the impression that I am a product of my material nature. This is called false ego. One who is absorbed in the thought of bodily concepts cannot understand his situation. Bhagavad Gita was spoken to liberate one from the bodily concept of life, and Arjuna put himself in the position in order to receive this information from the Lord. One must become free from the bodily concept of life. That is the preliminary activity of the transcendentalist. One who wants to become free, who wants to become liberated, must first of all learn that he is not this material body. Mukti or liberation means freedom from the material consciousness. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, also the definition of liberation is given. Muktir hitvanitha rupam swarupena vyavasthiti. Mukti means liberation from the contaminated consciousness of this material world and situation in pure consciousness. All the instructions of Bhagavad Gita are intended to awaken this pure consciousness, and therefore we find at the last stage of the Gita's instructions, that Krishna is asking Arjuna whether he is now purified in consciousness. Purified consciousness means acting in accordance with the instructions of the Lord. This is the whole sum and substance of purified consciousness. Consciousness is already there because we are part and parcel of the Lord. But for this, there is um, affinity of being affected by the inferior modes. But the Lord, being the supreme, is never affected. That is the difference between the supreme Lord and the small individual souls.
What is this consciousness? The consciousness is I am, then what am I? In contaminated consciousness, I am means I am the Lord of all, I serve it. I am the enjoyer. The world revolves because every living being thinks that he is the Lord and the creator of the material world. Material consciousness has two psychic divisions. One is that I am the creator, and the other is that I am the enjoyer. But actually, the Supreme Lord is both the creator and the enjoyer. And the living entity, being part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, is neither the creator nor the enjoyer, but a cooperator. He is created and the enjoyed. For instance, a part of a machine cooperates with the whole machine. A part of the body cooperates with the whole body. The hands, legs, eyes, and so on are parts of the body, but they are not actually the enjoyers. The stomach is the enjoyer. The legs moves, the hand supplies, the teeth chew, and all the parts of the body are engaged in satisfying the stomach because the stomach is the principal factor that nourishes the body's organization. Therefore, everything is given to the stomach. One nourishes the tree by watering its by watering its root, and one nourishes the body by feeding the stomach. So, if the body is to be kept in a healthy state, then the parts of the body must cooperate to feed the stomach. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is the enjoyer and the creator, and we, as subordinate living entities, are meant to cooperate to satisfy him. This cooperation will actually help us, just as food taken by the stomach will help all other parts of the body. If fingers of the hand will think that they should take the food themselves instead of giving it to the stomach, they will be frustrated. The central figure of creation and of enjoyment is the Supreme Lord, and the living entities are cooperators. By cooperation, they enjoy. The relation is also like of the master and the servant. If a master is fully satisfied, then the servant is satisfied. Similarly, the Supreme Lord should be satisfied. Although the tendency to become the creator and the tendency to enjoy the material world are there also in the living entities, because these tendencies are there in the Supreme Lord, who has created the manifested cosmic world. We shall find therefore in the Bhagavad Gita that the complete whole is comprised of the Supreme Controller, the control living entities, the cosmic manifestation, eternal time and karma or activities, and all these are explained in this text. All of these taken completely from the complete whole, and the complete whole is called the Supreme Absolute Truth. The complete whole and the supreme and the complete absolute truth and the are the complete personality of Godhead Shri Krishna. All manifestations are due to his different energies. He is the complete whole. It is also explained in the Bhagavad Gita that the impersonal Brahman is also subordinate to the complete Supreme Person. Brahmano hi pratishtaham. Brahman is more explicitly explained in the Brahma Sutra to be like the rays of the sunshine. The impersonal Brahman is the shining rays of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Impersonal Brahman is the incomplete realization of the absolute whole, and so also is the conception of Paramatma. In the 15th chapter, it shall be seen that the Supreme Personality of Godhead Purushottama is above both impersonal Brahman and the partial realization of Paramatma. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is called Sachidananda Vigraha. The Brahma Samhita begins in this way. Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadaradir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. Govinda Krishna is the cause of all causes. He is the primal cause, and he is the very form of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. Impersonal Brahman realization is the realization of the Sat eternity featured. Brahmata realization is the realization of the Sat Chit eternal knowledge, but realization of the personality of Godhead Krishna is the realization of all transcendental features, such as an Anand, eternity, knowledge, and bliss, in complete Vigraha form.
People with less intelligence consider the supreme truth to be impersonal, but he is a transcendental person, and this is confirmed in all Vedic literatures. Nityo Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam. Kathopanishad 2.30. As we are all individual living beings and have our individuality, the supreme absolute truth is also the ultimate issue, a person, and the realization of the supreme personality of Godhead is realization of all of the transcendental features in his complete form. The complete whole is not formless. If he is formless, or if he is less than any other thing, then he cannot be the complete whole. The complete whole must have everything within our experience and beyond our experience. Otherwise, it cannot be complete. The complete whole, the personality of Godhead, has immense potencies. Parasya Shaktir Vividha Shruyate. How Krishna is acting in different potencies is also explained in the Bhagavad Gita. This phenomenal world or material world in which we are placed is also complete in itself, because the 24 elements of which this material universe is temporarily manifested according to Sankhya philosophy are completely adjusted to produce complete resources which are necessary for the maintenance and sustenance of this universe. There is nothing extraneous extraneous, nor is there anything needed. This manifestation has its own time fixed by the energy of the Supreme Whole. And when its time is complete, this temporary manifestation will be annihilated by the complete arrangement of the complete. There is complete facility for all small complete units, namely the living entities, to realize the complete, and all sorts of incompleteness are experienced due to the incomplete knowledge of the complete. So Bhagavad Gita contains the complete knowledge of the Vedic wisdom. All Vedic knowledge is infallible, and Hindus accept Vedic knowledge to be complete and infallible. For example, cow dung is the stool of an animal, and according to Smriti or Vedic injunction, if one touches the stool of an animal, he has to take bath to purify himself. But in the Vedic scriptures, how the cow dung is considered to be purifying agent. One might consider to be contradictory, but it is accepted because it is the Vedic injunction, and by accepting this, one will not commit a mistake. Subsequently, it has been proven by modern science that cow dung contains all antiseptic properties. So, Vedic knowledge is complete because it is above all doubts and mistakes, and Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all Vedic knowledge. Vedic knowledge is not a question of research. Our research work is imperfect because we are researching things with imperfect senses. We have to accept the perfect knowledge which comes down, as is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, by the parampara, disciplic succession. We have to receive the knowledge from the proper source in disciplic succession, beginning with the supreme spiritual master, the Lord Himself, and hand it down to a succession of spiritual masters. Arjuna, the student who took lessons from Lord Sri Krishna, accepts everything that he says without contradicting him. One is not allowed to accept one portion of Bhagavad Gita and not another. No, we must accept the Bhagavad Gita without interpretation, without deletion, and without our own whimsical participation in that matter. The Gita should be taken as the most perfect presentation of Vedic knowledge. Vedic knowledge is received from transcendental sources, and the first words were spoken by the Lord Himself. The words spoken by the Lord are called um, apaurusha, meaning that they are different from the words spoken by the person of the mundane world who is infected with four defects. A mundaner is sure to commit mistakes and is invariably illusion, has a tendency to cheat others, and is limited by imperfect senses. With these four imperfections, one cannot deliver perfect information of all pervading knowledge.
Vedic knowledge is not imparted by such defective living entities. It was imparted into the heart of Brahma, the first created living being, and Brahma, in his turn, disseminated this knowledge to his sons and disciples as he originally received it from the Lord. The Lord is Purnam, all perfect, and there is no possibility of his becoming subjected to the laws of material nature. One should therefore be intelligent enough to know that the Lord is the only proprietor of everything in the universe, and that he is the original creator, the creator of Brahma. In the 11th chapter, the Lord is addressed as Prapitamaha. Ice cream layer. Sorry. um, sorry. In the 11th chapter, the Lord is addressed as a Param pra, Prati Prapitamaha because Brahma is addressed as Pitamaha, the grandfather, and he is the creator of the grandfather. So one should claim to be the proprietor of everything. One should not. So no one should claim to be the proprietor of everything. One should accept only things set aside for him by the Lord as his quota for his maintenance. Okay, yeah. There are many examples given of how we are to utilize those things which are set aside for us by the Lord. This is also explained in the Bhagavad Gita. In the beginning, Arjuna decided that he should not fight in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. This was his decision. Arjuna told the Lord that it was not possible for him to enjoy the kingdom after killing his own kinsman. This decision was based on the body because he was thinking that the body was himself and that his bodily relations or expansions were his brothers, nephews, brother-in-laws, grandfathers, and so on. Therefore, he wanted to satisfy his bodily demands. Bhagavad Gita was spoken by the Lord just to change this view, and at the end, Arjuna decides to fight under the directions of the Lord when he says, Karishya Vachanam Tava, I shall act according to your word. In this world, men are not meant for quarreling like cats and dogs. Men must be intelligent to realize the importance of human life and to refuse to act like ordinary animals. A human being should realize the aim of his life, and this direction is given in all the Vedic literatures, and the essence is given in Bhagavad Gita. Vedic literature is meant for human beings, not for animals. Animals can kill other living beings, other animals, and there is no question of sin on their part. But if a man kills an animal for the satisfaction of his uncontrolled taste, he must be responsible for breaking the laws of the nature. In this Bhagavad Gita, in the Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly explained that there are three kinds of activities according to the different modes of material nature: the activities of goodness, of passion, and of ignorance. Similarly, there are three kinds of eatables also: eatables in goodness, passion, and ignorance. All of this is clearly described, and if we properly utilize the instructions of Bhagavad Gita, then our whole life will become purified, and ultimately will be able to reach the destination which is beyond this material sky. That destination is called the Sanatan sky, the eternal spiritual sky. Yat Gatva na nivartate tad dhama paramam mama. In this material world, we find that everything is temporary. It comes into being, strays for some time, produces some byproducts, dwindles, and then vanishes. That is the law of material world. Whether we use as an example this body or a piece of fruit or anything. But beyond this temporary world, there is another world of which we have information. That world consists of another nature which is Sanatan, eternal. The Jiva is also described as Sanatan, eternal, and the Lord is also described as Sanatan. In the 11th chapter, we have an intimate relationship with the Lord, and because we are all qualitatively one, the Sanatan Dham, or the sky, the Sanatan Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Sanatan living entities, the purpose of Bhagavad Gita is to revive our Sanatan occupation, or Sanatan Dharma, which is eternal occupation of the living entity. We are we are temporarily engaged in different activities. With all of these activities can be purified when we give up when we give up all these temporary activities and take up the activities which are prescribed by the Supreme Lord. That is our pure life. That is called our pure life.
The Supreme Lord and his transcendent abode are both Sanatan, as are the living entities, and the combined association in Supreme Lord and the living entities is called a Sanatan abode, which is perfection of human life. The Lord is very kind to the living entities because they are his sons. The Lord Krishna declares in the Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Yonishu Kontaya Aham Bija Pradapita. I am the father of all. Of course, there are all types of living entities according to their various karmas. But here the Lord claims that He is the Father of all of them. Therefore, the Lord descends to reclaim all these fallen souls, conditioned souls, to call them back to the Sanatan eternal sky. That is also Sanatan sky, eternal sky, so that the Sanatan living entities may regain their eternal Sanatan positions in eternal association with the Lord. The Lord comes Himself in different form in different incarnations, or He sends His confidential servants or as sons or his associates as acharyas to reclaim the conditioned soul. Therefore, Sanatan Dharma does not refer to any sectarian process of religion. It is the eternal function of the living entities in the relationship with the Supreme Lord. Sanatan Dharma refers, as stated previously, to the eternal occupation of the living entity. Sripad Ramacharya has explained the word Sanatan as that which has neither a beginning nor end. So when we speak of Sanatan Dharma, we must take it for granted on the authority of Sripad Ramanujacharya that it has neither beginning nor end. The English word religion is a little different from the Sanatan Dharma. Religion conveys the idea of faith, and faith may change. One may have faith in particular process, and he may change his faith and adopt another. But Sanatan Dharma refers to that activity which cannot be changed. For instance, liquidity cannot be taken from water, nor can heat be taken from fire. Similarly, the eternal function of the living entity cannot be taken from the living entity. Sanatan Dharma is eternal, integral with the living entity. When we speak of Sanatan Dharma, therefore, we must take it for granted on the authority of Srimad Ramanujacharya that it has neither beginning nor end. That which has neither end nor beginning must not be sectarian, for it cannot be limited by any boundaries. Those belonging to some sectarian faith will wrongly consider the Sanatan Dharma is also sectarian. But if we go deeply into the matter and consider in the light of modern science, it is possible for us to see that Sanatan Dharma is the business of all people in the world, of all living entities of the universe. Non-Sanatan religious faith may have some beginning in the annals of human society, but there is no beginning to the history of Sanatan Dharma because it remains eternally with the living entities. Insofar as the living entities are concerned, the authoritative Shastras state that the living entity has neither birth nor death. In the Gita, it is stated that the living entity is never born and he never dies. He is eternal and indestructible, and he continues to live after the destruction of his temporary material body. In reference to the concept of Sanatan Dharma, we must try to understand the concept of religion from the Sanskrit root meaning of the word. Dharma refers to that which is constantly existing with a particular object. We conclude that there is heat and light along with the fire. Without heat and light, there is no meaning to the word fire. Similarly, we must discover the essential part of the living being, that part which is his constant companion. That constant companion is his eternal quality, and that eternal quality is his eternal religion.
When Sanatan Goswami asked Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu about the Swarup of every living entity, the Lord replied that the Swarupa or constitutional position of the living entity is to render service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If we analyze the statement of Lord Chaitanya's, we can easily see that every living entity is constantly engaged in rendering service to another living being. As living being serves other living beings in various capacities. By doing so, the living entity enjoys life. The lower animals serve the human beings as their servants serve their master. A serves B as master, B serves C master, C serves D master, and so on. Under these circumstances, we can see that one friend serves another friend, the mother serves the son, the wife serves the husband serves the wife, and so on. If we go on searching in the spirit, it will be seen that there is no exception in the society of living beings to the activity of service. The politician presents his manifesto for the public to convince them of his capacity for service. The voters therefore give the politician their valuable votes, thinking that he will render valuable service to the society. Shopkeeper serves the customer and the artisan serves the capitalist. The capitalist serves the family and the family serves the state in the terms of eternal capacity of the eternal living being. In this way, we can see that no living being is exempt from rendering service to other living beings, and therefore we can safely conclude that service is the constant companion of the living entity, and that the rendering of service is the eternal religion of the living being. Yet man professes to belong to a particular type of faith with reference to particular time and circumstance, and thus claims to be a Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, or an adherent or of any other sect. Such designations are non-Sanatan Dharma. A Hindu may change his faith to become a Muslim, or a Muslim may change his faith to become a Hindu, or a Christian may change his faith, and so on. But in all circumstances, the change of religious faith does not affect the eternal occupation of rendering service to others. The Hindu, Muslim, or Christian in all circumstances is a servant of someone. Thus, to profess a particular type of faith is not to profess one's Sanatan Dharma. The rendering of service to the rendering of service is Sanatan Dharma. Actually, we are related to the Supreme Lord in service. The Supreme Lord is the Supreme Enjoyer, and we are living entities and we living entities are his servitors. We are created for his enjoyment, and if we participate in that eternal enjoyment with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we become happy. We cannot become happy otherwise. It is not possible to be happy independently, just as no one part of the body can be happy without cooperating with the stomach. It is not possible for the living entity to be happy without rendering transcendental loving service unto the Supreme Lord.
In the Bhagavad Gita, worship of different demigods or rendering service to them is not approved. It is stated in the seventh chapter, 20th verse. कामस्तस्ते ऋतज्ञाना प्रपद्यन्ते अन्य देवताः तं तं नियमम् आस्थाय प्रकृत्या नियतः सेवया. Those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desire surrender into demigods and follow their particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. Here it is plainly said that those devotees who are directed by lust worship of the demigods and not the Supreme Lord Krishna. When we mention the name of Krishna, we do not refer to any sectarian name. Krishna means the highest pleasure, and it is confirmed that the Supreme Lord is never the Supreme Lord is the reservoir of storehouse of all pleasure. We are all hankering after pleasure. Anandamaya Abhyasat. The living entities like the Lord are full of consciousness and they are after happiness. The Lord is perpetually happy, and if the living entities associated with the Lord cooperate with Him and take part in His association, then they will also be happy. The Lord descends to the mortal world to show His pastimes in Vrindavan, which are full of happiness. When Lord Sri Krishna was in Vrindavan, his activities with the cowherd boyfriends, with his damsel friends, and with other inhabitants of Vrindavan, and the cows were all full of happiness. The total population of Vrindavan knew nothing but Krishna. But Lord Krishna even discouraged his father Nanda Maharaj from worshipping the demigod Indra because he wanted to establish the fact that people need not worship any demigod. They need only worship the Supreme Lord because their ultimate goal is to return to his abode. The abode of Lord Sri Krishna is described in the Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, 6th verse. Na tad bhasyate suryo, na shashanko na pavakaha, yadgatva na nivartante tadadhama paramam mama. That supreme abode of mine is not illumined by sun or moon, nor by the fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world.
Should we complete it or should we read tomorrow?
Mataji, I can read. What about you?
Okay. This verse gives a description of that eternal sky. Of course, we have a material conception of the sky and we think of it in relationship to the sun, moon, stars, and so on. But in this verse, the Lord states that in the eternal sky, there is no need for the sun, nor for the moon, nor electricity, or fire, or of any kind, because the spiritual sky is already illuminated by the Brahmajyoti, the rays emanating from the Supreme Lord. We are trying with difficulty to reach other planets, but it is not difficult to understand that the abode of the Supreme Lord. This abode is referred to as Goloka. In Brahma Samhita, it is beautifully described. Goloka eva nivasyate akhilatma bhutaha. The Lord resides eternally in his abode Goloka. And yet he can be approached from this world. And to this end, the Lord comes to manifest his real form, Sachidananda Vigraha. When he manifests his form, there is no need for imagining what he looks like. To discourage imaginative speculation, he descends and exhibits himself as he is, as Shyamasundar. Unfortunately, the less intelligent deride him because he comes as one of us, placed with us as a human being. But because of this, we should not consider the Lord as one of us. It is by his omnipotency that he presents himself in his real form before us and displays his pastimes, which are replicas of those pastimes. Of those pastimes found in his abode. If the effulgent rays of the spiritual sky in the effulgent rays of the spiritual sky, there are innumerable planets floating. The Brahmajyotir emanates from the supreme abode, Krishna Lok, and the Anandamay Chinmay planets, which are not material, float in those rays. The Lord says, Na tad bhasate suryo na shashanko na bhavaka yat katvar nirivartante tat dhama paramama. One who can approach that supreme spiritual sky is not required to descend again to the material world. In the material sky, even if we approach the highest planet Brahmaloka, what to speak of the moon, we will find some conditions of life, namely birth, death, disease, and old age. No planet in the material universe is free from these principles of material existence. The living entities are traveling from one planet to another, but it is not that we can go any planet we like merely by a mechanical arrangement. If we desire to go to other planets, there is a process for going there. There is also mentioned Yanti Deva Vrata Devan Pitran Yanti Vrata Vrata. No mechanical arrangement is necessary if we want interplanetary travel. The Gita instructs Yanti Deva Vrata Devan. The moon, the sun, and other higher planets are called Svargaloka. There are three different statuses of planets: higher, middle, and lower planetary systems. The Earth belongs to the middle planetary system. Bhagavad Gita informs us that how to travel to the higher planetary systems. Devalok with a simple formula Yanti Deva Vrata Devan. One need only worship the particular demigod of that particular planet. In that way, go to the moon, the sky, the sun, or any other higher planetary systems.
Yet Bhagavad Gita does not advise us to go out of heaven. Yet Bhagavad Gita does not advise us to go to any of the planets in this material world, because even if we go to Brahma Loka, the highest planet, through some sort of mechanical contrivance by maybe traveling for 40,000 years, and who would live that long? We we still find the material inconvenience of birth, death, disease, and old age. But one who wants to approach the supreme planet, Krishna Loka, or any other planet within the spiritual sky will not meet with these material inconveniences. Amongst all the planets in the spiritual sky, there is one supreme planet called Golok Vrindavan, the original planet in the abode in the abode of the original personality of Godhead Sri Krishna. All of his information is given in the Bhagavad Gita, and we are given through its information how to leave the material world and begin a truly blissful life in the spiritual sky. In the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the real picture of the material world is given. It is said there, Urdhva Moolam Adha Shakham Ashwatham Prahurabhyayam Chandam Siyasi Paranani Yastam Vedasa Vedavi. Here in the material world is described as a tree whose roots are upwards and branches are below. We have experience of a tree whose roots are upward. If one stands on the bank of a river or any other reservoir of water, he can see that the trees are reflected in the water are upside down. The branches go downward and the root upward. Similarly, this material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. The material world is the material world is but a shadow of reality. In the shadow, there is no reality or substantially. But from the shadow, we can understand that there are uh, substances and reality. In the desert, there is no water, but the mirage suggests that there is such a thing as water. In the material world, there is no water, there is no happiness, but the real water of actual happiness is there in the spiritual world.
The Lord suggests that we attain the world in following manner. Nirmana moha jita sanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivritta kamaha vendera vimukta sukadukha samangher gacchante amurdha padam avyayam tat. The padam avyayam or eternal kingdom can be reached by one who is nirman moha. What does this mean? We are after designations. Someone wants to become sir, someone wants to become lord, someone wants to become the president or a rich man or a king or something else. As long as we are attached to these designations, we are attached to the body because these designations belong to the body, but we are not these bodies. And realizing this is the first stage of spiritual realization. We are associated with three modes of material nature, but we must become detached through the devotional service to the Lord. If we are not attached to devotional service to the Lord, then we cannot become detached from the modes of material nature. Designations and attachment are due to our lust and desire, our wanting to lord it over the material nature. As long as we do not give up this propensity of lording over the material nature, there is no possibility of returning to the kingdom of this supreme, the Sanatan Dharma. That eternal kingdom which is never destroyed can be approached by one who is not bewildered by the attractions of false material enjoyments, who is situated in the service of the Supreme Lord. One so situated can easily approach that supreme abode. Elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita it is stated, Avyaktoksara iti yuktas tam ahu paramam gatim yam prapya na nivartante taddhama paramam mama. Avyakta means unmanifested. Not even all of the material world is manifested before us. Our senses are so imperfect that we cannot even see of all the stars within this material universe. And in the Vedic literature, we can receive much information about all the planets, and we believe it or not believe it. All of the important planets are described in the Vedic literatures, especially Srimad Bhagavatam. In the spiritual world, which is beyond the material sky, is described as avyakta, unmanifested. One should desire and hanker after that supreme spiritual kingdom. For when one attains that kingdom, he has not have to return to this material world. Next, when we raise the question of how one goes about approaching that abode of the Supreme Lord, information of this is given in the 11th chapter. It is said, Antakale cha mame va smaran mukta kalevaram ya prayati samadbhavam yati nastyatra samshayah. Anyone who and whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remembering me alone at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. One who thinks of Krishna at the time of his death goes to Krishna. One must remember the form of Krishna. If he quits his body thinking of this form, he surely approaches the supreme spiritual kingdom. Mad Bhavam refers to the supreme nature of the supreme being. The supreme being is Satchidananda Vikram. That is, his form is eternal, full of knowledge and bliss. Our present body is not Satchidananda. It is asat, not sat. It is not eternal. It is perishable. It is not chit, full of knowledge, but it is full of ignorance. We have no knowledge of the spiritual kingdom, nor do we have perfect knowledge of this material world, where there are so many things unknown to us. The body is called Niranand. Instead of being full of bliss, it is full of misery. All of the miseries we experience in this material world arise from the body. And one who leaves this body thinking of Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, at once attains a Satchidananda body.
The process of quitting this body and getting another body in the material world is also organized. A man dies after it has been decided what form of body he will have in the next life. Higher authorities, not the living entity himself, make this decision. According to our activities in this life, we either rise or sink. This life is a preparation for the next life. If we can prepare, therefore, in this life to get promotion to the kingdom of God, then surely after quitting this material body, we will attain a spiritual body just like the Lord. And as explained as explained before, there are different kinds of transcendentalists: the Brahmavadi, Paramatmavadi, and the devotee. And as mentioned in the Brahma Jyoti spiritual sky, there are innumerable spiritual planets. The number of these planets is far greater than all of the planets of this material world. This material world has been approximated as only one quarter of the creation. Akamshena Sthito Jagat. In this material segment, there are millions and billions of universes and trillions of planets and suns, stars and moons. But this whole material creation is only a fragment of the total creation. Most of the creation is the spiritual sky. One who desires to merge into the existence of the Supreme Brahma is at once transferred into the Brahma Jyoti of the Supreme Lord and thus attains the spiritual sky. The devotee who wants to enjoy the association of the Lord enters into the Vaikuntha planets, which are innumerable, and the Supreme Lord, by his plenary expansions and as Narayana, with four hands and with different names like Pradyumna, Aniruddha, Govinda, and Govinda associates with them there. Therefore, at the end of life, the transcendentalists think either of the Brahma Jyoti, the Paramatma, um, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. In all cases, they enter into the spiritual sky, but not only the devotee or he who is in personal touch with the Supreme Lord enters into the Vaikuntha planets or the Golok Vrindavan planets. The Lord further adds that of this, there is no doubt. This must be believed firmly. We should not reject that. Which does not tally with our imagination. Our attitude should be that of Arjuna. I believe that I believe everything that you have said. Therefore, when the Lord says that at the time of death, whoever thinks of him as Brahma or Paramatma or as the Supreme Personality of Godhead certainly enters into the spiritual sky. There is no doubt about it. There is no question of disbelieving it. The Bhagavad Gita also explains the general principle that makes it possible to enter the spiritual kingdom simply by thinking that the supreme simply by thinking of the supreme at the end of death. Yam yam vapi smaranbhavam tiriti ante kalevaram tam tam evaiti konteya sada tadbhava bhavidam. Whatever the state of being one remembers, when he quits his present body, in his next life he will attain to that state without fail. Now, first we must understand that the material universe is display of one of the energies of the Supreme Lord. In the Vishnu Puran, the total energies of the Supreme Lord are delineated. Vishnu Shakti Paraprokta Kshetra Jnanakya Tatha Para Avidya Karma Samajnana Tritiya Shakti Rishyati. The Supreme Lord has diverse and innumerable energies which are beyond our conception. However, great learned sages or liberated souls have studied these energies and have analyzed them into three parts. and all the energies of the Lord, and all the energies are of Vishnu Shakti. That is to say, they are different potencies of Lord Vishnu. The first energy is Para, transcendental. Living entities also belong to the superior energy, as has already been explained. The other energies or material energies are in the mode of ignorance. At the time of death, either we can remain in the inferior energy of this material world, or we can transfer into the energy of the spiritual world. So the Bhagavad Gita says, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajiti ante kalavuram tam tam evaiti kanteya sada tadbhava bhavitam. Whatever the state of being one remembers, when he quits his present body, in his next life he will attain to that stage without fail.
Should we end or complete it? Hare Krishna, are you here?
Yes, Mataji.
Okay. In life, we are accustomed to thinking either of the material or the spiritual energy. Now, how can we transfer our thoughts from the material energy to the spiritual energy? There are so many literatures which fill our thoughts with the material energy. Newspapers, magazines, novels, etc. Our thinking, which is now absorbed in these literatures, must be transferred to the Vedic literatures. The great sages, therefore, have written so many Vedic literatures, such as the Puranas. The Puranas are not imaginative; they are historical records. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there is the following verse: Maya Mugdha Jivera Nahi Swata Krishna Jnana Jivera Kripaye Kaila Krishna Veda Purana. The forgetful living entities or conditioned living souls have forgotten their relationship with the Lord, and they are engrossed in thinking of material activities. Just to transfer their thinking power to the spiritual sky, Krishna, Dvayapan, Vyasa have given a great number of literatures. First, he divided the Vedas into four, then he explained them in the Puranas. And for less capable people, he wrote the Mahabharata. In the Mahabharata, there is given the Bhagavad Gita. Then all Vedic literature is summarized in the Vedanta Sutra. And for future guidance, we have natural commentation on the Vedanta Sutra called the Srimad Bhagavatam. We must always engage our minds in reading these literatures, just as materialists engage their mind in reading the newspapers, magazines, and so many materialistic literatures. So we must transfer our reading to these literatures which are given to us by Vyasadeva. In that way, it will be possible for us to remember the Supreme Lord at the time of death. That is the only way suggested by the Lord, and He guarantees the result. There is no doubt. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmar yutyaja mam mayyarpit manobhatir mame vaishyasi asamshayah. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna and at the same time continue your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. He does not advise Arjuna to simply remember him and give up his occupation. No, the Lord never suggests anything impractical. In this material world, in order to maintain the body, one has to work. Human society is divided according to the work into four divisions of social order: Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. Brahman, the intelligence class, is working in one way. Kshatriya, or administrative class, is working in another way. The mercantile class and the laborers at, or are all tending to their specific duties in human society, whether one is a laborer, merchant, administrator, or farmer, or even one belongs to the highest class and is a literary man, a scientist, or a theologian. He has to work in order to maintain his existence. The Lord therefore tells Arjuna that he need not give up his occupation, but while he is engaged in his occupation, he should remember Krishna, Mam Anusmar. If he doesn't practice remembering Krishna while he is struggling for existence, then it will not be possible for him to remember Krishna at the time of death. Lord Chaitanya advises us. He says, Krishna's Kirtaniya Sadahari. One should practice chanting of the holy names of the Lord always. The name of the Lord and the Lord are non-different. So Lord Krishna's instructions to Arjuna to remember me, and Lord Chaitanya's injunction to always chant the names of Lord Krishna at the same instruction. There is no difference because Krishna and Krishna's name are not different. In the absolute status, there is no difference between the reference and the referent. Therefore, we have to practice remembering the Lord 24 hours a day. by chanting his names and molding our life's activities in such a way that we can remember him always.
How is this possible? The acharyas give the following example. If a married woman is attached to another man, or if a man has an attachment for a woman other than his wife, then the attachment is to be considered very strong. One with such an attachment is always thinking of always thinking of the loved one. The wife who is thinking of her lover is always thinking of meeting him, even while she is carrying out her household chores. In fact, she carries out her household work even more carefully so her husband will not suspect her attachment. Similarly, we should always remember the Supreme Lover Sri Krishna and at the same time perform our material duties very nicely. A strong sense of love is required here. If we have a strong sense of love for the Supreme Lord, then we can discharge our duty at the same time and remember Him. And at the same time, we can remember Him. But we have to develop the sense of love. Arjuna, for instance, was always thinking of Krishna. He was the constant companion of Krishna, and at the same time, he was the warrior. Krishna did not advise him to give up fighting and go to the forest and meditate. When Lord Krishna delineates the yoga system to Arjuna, Arjuna says that the practice of the system is not possible for him. Arjuna Vacha, Yoyam Yogas Tvaya Prokta, Samyena Madhusudhana, Ityashaya, Itasya, Itasyaham na pashyami, Chanchalavasthitam stiram. Arjuna said, O Madhusudana, the system yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and undurable for me. For the mind is restless and unsteady. But the Lord says, Yoginam abhi sarvesham madgatre madgatena tan madgatena ratanatma shraddhavan bhajante yomam samay yuktatmano mata. Of all the yogis, the one with great faith who always abides me, thinking of me within himself and renders transcendental loving service to me, is most intimately united with me in yoga and highest of all. That is my opinion. So one who thinks that the Supreme Lord always is the greatest yogi, the supermost jnani, and the supermost jnani and the greatest devotee at the same time. Lord further tells Arjuna that as a Kshatriya, he cannot give up his fighting. But if Arjuna finds remembering Krishna, then he will be able to remember Krishna at a time of death. But one must be completely surrendered in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. We work not only with our body actually, but with our mind and intelligence. So if the intelligence and the mind are always engaged in the thought of the Supreme Lord, then naturally the senses are also engaged in His service. Superficially, at least, the activities of the senses remain the same, but the consciousness is changed. The Bhagavad Gita teaches one how to absorb the mind and intelligence in the thought of the Lord. That absorption will enable one to transfer himself to the kingdom of God. If the mind is engaged in Krishna's service, then the senses are automatically engaged in His service. This this is the art, and this is also the secret of Bhagavad Gita. Total absorption in the thought of Sri Krishna. Modern man has struggled very hard to reach the moon, but he has not tried very hard to elevate himself spirituality. If one has 50 years of life ahead of him, he should engage that brief time in cultivating his practice of remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This practice is the devotional process. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam. These 9 processes, of which the easiest is Shravanam, hearing the Bhagavad Gita from the realized person, will turn one to the thought of the Supreme Being. This will lead to remembering the Supreme Lord and will enable one, upon leaving the body, to attain a spiritual body which is fit for association with the Supreme Lord. The Lord further says, Abhyasa Yogena Yuktena चेतसा नान्यगामिना paramam purusham divyam yati parthanuchintayam. He who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undiverted from the path, he, O Arjuna, is sure to reach me.
This is not a very difficult process. However, we must learn it from an experienced person. That Vijnanartham Sagurum Eva Bhikachet. One must approach a person who is already in the practice. The mind is always flying to this and that, but one must practice concentrating the mind always on the form of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna or on the sound of his name. The mind is naturally restless, going hither and thither. but it can rest in the sound vibration of Krishna. One must thus meditate on Paramam Purusham, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the spiritual kingdom, the spiritual sky, and thus attain Him. The ways and the means for ultimate realization, ultimate attainment, are stated in the Bhagavad Gita, and the doors of this knowledge are open for everyone. No one is spared out. All classes of man can approach Lord Krishna by thinking of Him, for hearing and thinking of Him are possible for everyone. The Lord further says, Mam hi partha व्यापश्चित्य येऽपि स्युः पापयोनयः स्त्रियो वैश्यस्य तथा शूद्रस्तेऽपि यान्ति परां गतिम् किं पुनर्ब्राह्मणा पुण्या भक्ता राजर्षयस्तथा अनित्यम् असुखं लोकम् इमं प्राप्य भजस्व माम्. Thus the Lord says that even a merchant, a fallen woman, or a laborer, or even a human being in the lower status of life can attain the supreme. One does not need highly developed intelligence. The point is that one who accepts the principle of Bhagavad Gita and accepts the Supreme Lord as the summum bonum and as the highest target, the ultimate goal, can approach the Lord in the spiritual sky. If one adopts the principle enunciated in Bhagavad Gita, he can make his life perfect and make a permanent solution to all problems of his life. This is the sum and substance of the entire Bhagavad Gita. In conclusion, Bhagavad Gita is a transcendental literature which one should read very carefully. Gita Shastram idam punyam ya patet prayatah puman. If one properly follows the instructions of Bhagavad Gita, one can be freed from all miseries and anxieties of life. Bhaya Shokadi Varjata. One will be freed from all fears in life, and one's next life will be spiritual. Gita Mahatmya 1. There is also further advantage. Gita Dhyana Shilasya Pranayam Parasya Cha Naiva Santi Hi Papani Purva Janma Kritani Cha. If one reads Bhagavad Gita very sincerely and with all seriousness, then by grace of the Lord, the reactions of his past misdeeds will not act upon him. Gita Mahatma 2, the Lord says very loudly in the last portion of Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tvam Sarva Papebhyo Mokshishyami Ma Shacha. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. Thus the Lord takes all responsibility for one who surrenders unto him, and he indemnifies such a person against all reactions of sin. Mala nirmochanam pumsam Jalasnanam dine dine Saktad Gitamrita Snanam Samsara Malanashanam. One may cleanse himself daily by by taking a bath in water, but if one takes a bath even once in the sacred Ganges of Bhagavad Gita, for him the dot of material life is altogether vanquished. Gita Mahatmya 3. Gita Sugita Kartavya Kim Anyaiva Shastra Visharadai या स्वयं पद्मनाभस्य मुख पद्म पद्माद विनिर्षत. Because Bhagavad Gita is spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one need not read any other literature. One need attentively and regularly hear and read Bhagavad Gita. In the present age, people are so absorbed in the mundane activities that it is not possible for them to read all Vedic literatures. But this is not necessary. This one book, Bhagavad Gita, will suffice because it is the essence of all Vedic literature. Because it is especially spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Gita Mahatmya 4. As it is said, भारतामृत सर्वस्वं विष्णुवक्त्रादुक् विनिहृषतं Gita Gangodakam Pitva Punarjanma न विद्यते. One who drinks the water of the Ganges attains salvation. So what to speak of one who drinks the nectar of Bhagavad Gita? Bhagavad Gita is the essential nectar of the Mahabharata, and it is spoken by the Lord himself, the original Vishnu. Bhagavad Gita comes from the mouth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Ganges, it is said, to emanate from the lotus feet of the Lord. Of course, there is no difference between the mouth and the feet of the Supreme Lord, but from the impartial study, we appreciate that the Bhagavad Gita is even more important than the water of the Ganges. Sarvopanishado Gavo Dugda Gopala Nandanaha Bharto Vatsa Sudhirbhukta Dugdam Gitamritam Mahat. This Gita Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita, the essence of all Vedic Upanishads, it is just like a cow, and Lord Krishna, who is famous as a cowherd boy, is milking this cow. Arjuna is the calf, and learned scholars and pure devotees are to drink the nectarian milk of Bhagavad Gita. Gita Mahatmya 6. Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Geetam Eko Devo Devaki Putra Eva Eko Mantrastasya Namani Yani Karmapi Ekam Tasya Devasya Seva. In this present age, people are very much eager to have one scripture, one God, one religion, and one occupation. Therefore, Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Geetam. Let there be one scripture only, one common scripture for the entire world, Bhagavad Gita. Eko Devo Devaki Putra Eva. Let there be one God for the whole world, Shri Krishna. Eko Mantrastasya Namani, and one hymn, one mantra, one prayer, the chanting of his name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Karmapi ekam tasya devasya seva. And let there be one work only, the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hari Bol. So this is our disciplic succession.
You can read this also.
Okay. You can read if you wish.
The disciplic succession. Evam parapara praptim evam Raja Sharyo Bidu. Bhagavad Gita 4.2. This Bhagavad Gita as it is received through this disciplic succession. Krishna, Brahma, Narada, Vyasa, Madhava, Padmanabha, Narahari, Madhava, Akshobhya, Jayatirtha, Jnana Sindhu, Dayanidhi, Vidyanidhi, Rajendra, Jayadharma, Purushottama, Brahma Tirtha, Vyasa Tirtha, Lakshmipati, Madhavendra Puri, Ishwar Puri, Lord Chaitanya, Rupa Goswami, Sanatan Goswami, and Swarup Goswami, Raghunath Goswami, and Jeev Goswami, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, Narottama Das Thakur, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, Bhaktivedanta Thakur, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.